You want to talk about Michigan?
We'll pass this. Let me say that.
I'll be glad to talk about Michigan.
I know, we don't have all night.
Oh, geez. It's so much fun. Is everybody good?
Everybody's here.
Everybody's really, really good. Okay, we're ready to go. Good evening. This is a special session of Town Council. It is 4 o'clock. A beautiful, beautiful day here in Snowmass Village. It is September the 12th. So with that, roll call.
Butler,
Here.
Circus,
Here.
Mattson,
Here.
Shank,
Here.
Good.
Here.
Okay, why don't I have the EOTC pack it up, because I pulled up the wrong one. There we go. We don't have anyone in the audience this evening for public comments, so we will proceed. Consent agenda, there is not one here.
This is a work session, is that?
Well,
No,
it's a
not.
special meeting
Oh,
for Town
special
Council.
We're in an executive session at the
Okay.
end,
Yeah.
so it needs to be,
Uh,
kept the same format, but didn't put a lot of items.
Yes. We move into public hearings, quasi-judicial hearings. There are none this evening. And then the policy and legislative public hearings, there are none for this evening. Now we move into administrative reports, and as everyone knows, it's that time of the year when we start budgets. It's my most non-favorite topic because it
I'm
means
right there with
detail and numbers.
It's the only one that seems to really like it is Bob.
Well, you know, I can't help it because of his background.
Yeah.
And he's got notes. I have mental notes as I went through it, and I applaud the town for working so hard to put this together. And let's go ahead and get started.
I'll start.
Yep, Clint, you're up.
So, I mean, I think the budget's gonna be presented to you in a full format on October 2nd. We're going to present the first version to the FAB a week from tomorrow, so in 8 days. You'll see 99% of what they see. I mean, there won't be much difference between the two, we don't expect. I think tonight's discussion's got two topics. One was really intended to begin with, what are the big stuff?
Yep.
It's not the numbers issues, it's not the detail issues. If there were some big concepts that the council wanted to make sure that we were working to address, I wanted to make sure that we had a month before you see it, or less than that,
Okay.
3 weeks, that we were working to find ways to work those ideas into the budget. So it's kind of that general discussion. To that point, we went ahead and included the town goal setting statement, the town council goal setting statement from earlier this year. And then, as a kind of a follow-up to that kind of broad discussion, Councilor Circus asked that we include an update on where we are with CIP projects. And so we've got that specific update in here, and Ann and Dave and Marianne and I can chime in on a lot of that detail and talk about how we're trying to prioritize projects, what we expect to get done this year, where we are with some certain things, and how we expect to prioritize them for next year as well. So, Madam Mayor, it's up to you if you want to talk about some broad stuff, if there's anything in particular. I mean, I can tell you what we did is we took the goal statement. Well, first of all, we did is we got to, when we're developing the budget, the day-to-day stuff, the annual, the day-to-day obligations, responsibilities, we deal with those first, and then we try and make sure that we're working on ways to address all the goals and priorities that the council outlines in that goal statement. Some of those priorities and goals are very budget-focused, housing, for example, and some of them take a pittance, almost no money, which is that kind of increased communication idea. And so we've tried to, as we develop this thing, to work those things in there, but really I think this first part of this discussion is for you guys. Is there anything in particular, anything new that's not on those list of goals that we need to be focusing on? If this is short, that's great, because that means we know what we're aiming for, we know what we've been developing towards, but if there was just something else that we didn't know about that has been talked about, that would be great to know now as well. And if this discussion is short, then we can jump into the CIP part of it too, and talk about how we're projecting rollovers, projects carrying forward, those types of issues.
Anything on the goals for the town? I think they're they're all very current and appropriate, and we heard from the community survey, they seem to be pretty darn realistic. And as we go through this, I think it'll be important to understand where we are with the comp plan as it weaves into or relates to budget as well. One being employee housing and some issues and metrics around employee housing. So anyway, I think we jump right into it. What do you all think? You good?
I'm ready to go to the
You're
CIP.
ready to go.
See, that's why I have all these notes.
Mine's all of, some of them committed just to memory. Oh, love you, Bob.
So just before we leave that,
I'm old and I don't have such a good memory anymore. I gotta write it down.
Well, Alyssa writes so much down, so she can help us remember from last year as we got to the discussion.
Exactly.
Okay,
Was.
it's really going to be a good discussion, and we look forward to the discussion and presentation from staff. So let's jump right into the CIP.
So what we've done this year, and I'll let Ann, and she's got the details on a lot of these issues, but last year at least, when we discussed the projects, there were some questions about what projects would be carried forward, and then when we reappropriate for the carry forward in the spring of every year, I think Councilor Circus brought up the question of, how do we know this? And so what we tried to do this year, we did it last year, and we wanted to redo it this year with one different column, hoping that help explain some things. But when we budget for projects in any one year, we try to put all the dollars in that first year. And even if it's a multi-year project, we carry forward those dollars to the next year so that we've got all the dollars lined up in year one. And so we've got before you here projects that are lined up in 17 and projects that are lined up in 18, and you can see how we're carrying different projects forward for different items.
So, Clint?
Yes.
Help me understand that theory. In the nonprofit world where I live, we will identify a project, and let's say it's a $10 million project. We will go through, we identify what the total cost of the project might be, but we do funding each year for each phase of a project versus multi-year to do the placeholder. Because things change in terms of priorities, and money may be allocated to a project, and then there's something else that pops up, so all those things. So I'm not accustomed to doing multi-year funding or approval for projects, so help me out. What's the theory there?
Behind the capital project, I mean, so for operations, what you described, we do all the time. We're adjusting.
I'm talking about capital.
But
I'm
in-
talking
but in-
heavy capital.
But in capital, primarily, we go under contract when we start these projects. And so if we're gonna go under contract, the theory is, make sure you have all the money available to pay that contract.
Well, my thought is on the design, you don't wanna go, you're not under contract, you're under design and then.
And so and that is
Okay.
a distinction we make. For design, that's one number, and then for the actual contract, for the construction, normally we would go into a separate contract. And we do try and make that distinction between those two types of projects.
So I was gonna correct Clint, but and that's
Go
not
ahead.
very respectful.
No,
But,
always correct me.
Go ahead.
but Clint's right on the sense of, in general, it's all on 1 year because we try to identify that construction side. But there are some that are just design, and then when we get through design, you further refine that scope, and we go through the budget process, and then we'll identify the construction phase.
Okay.
If they're doable for design and construction in all 1 year, then it's all lumped in a year. So we try to differentiate that.
Okay.
So Brush Creek, Owl Creek intersection is.
It's gonna be a
is an
multi-year.
So
So-
that's the design that's budgeted.
That's the design phase. That's what you're seeing here on this, of that 30,000 down below is the design. Sorry, 300, 0 off there.
Why are we doing the design if we haven't gone through the comp plan?
Well, we've gone through on the conceptual side, and we know that there is an issue with the level of service. And so that's basically to work on the design elements of taking it from what conceptual we had before, that we talked about 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
More than that.
More, before I was here, and taking it to the next phase. I mean, you, as council, you always have a right to not award a contract or not to go further on a project, but it's our job to identify that we've got an issue out there in the sense of we need to start designing for this. We don't identify in 18 when that construction would be. That would be those conversations as we go through design and further vetting the project.
I mean, when you look at this, I think it's a prioritization. This is our best shot as staff, objectively looking at needs, to say, here's where we think the priority should be. And if, to your example, Madam Mayor, I mean, if all of a sudden you said, hey, we think you're overshooting for that design because it's too soon, for whatever reason, I think that's a reason, this is the time to have that discussion. We've identified that as far as intersection improvements go, as far as safety issues go, we think that's the next one, because that's got our lowest level of service. But if we said if you all said, let's wait another year and see what the development proposals look like through the comp plan, that's reasonable. But we're trying to lay out design options and projects.
Where does the $300,000 come from for a
353?
design
353?
allowance?
It's a general
I mean, to me, it almost seems like it's,
I mean, where does that number come from?
It's coming out of the general fund.
Oh.
When we've done estimates, we estimate that project to be between $3 to $5 million.
okay, but
And we do
that-
10% of
but
that.
that $300,000 number is not an allowance for design. That's an allowance for where you think it's going to cost.
In the conceptual designs, we come up with a number, and then for this design, we took a 10% of that and think that's what design's gonna cost.
And we went through and discussed this with SGM on, we need to do surveying, we need to do geotechnical, we need to do other investigative work, easements, and then it would go into the design. So there's a lot of subcontracts.
Sure, so,
typically in that.
but those design numbers are built into this $300,000
Yes,
number?
yeah.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Maybe we go project by project.
Sure.
Okay.
Can I just make
Yeah,
a comment?
okay.
And I think I'm actually very much in agreement with the way you describe how capital projects ought to be budgeted. All right, and I'll try to repeat as what I understood you to say, so that it's clear. But if a project is to be completed in a single year, you can budget the entire project, the design plus the construction. If a project is a multi-year project, the total dollars can be discussed in general as, this is what we think it's gonna cost, but the annual budgeting should be for what should be completed during that during that fiscal year.
Yes,
And one of the big reasons, I guess, I feel that way is that if someone were to look at this report, and just looked at it without having an awful lot of background in what the concept was in developing it, one could say, you've, in 2017, you budgeted 300 million, you budgeted $5.5 million worth of projects, and you only completed $2.25 million. And that's only a 40% completion. What are you doing out there, right? It appears that we're not really keeping up on our capital projects that we think we need. But that's not really the case, because most of the difference is multiple year
Right.
projects.
and to be honest, I mean, I think we had this conversation last year at budget, when we talked about the CIP. It was a big list
Yeah,
and a lot to get done. But I think if you look through on the project status, you'll see either quite a few completes or finished, and you'll also see kind of the status of, we got a lot of, balls in the hopper, what is that phrase?
Balls in the air?
There you go.
yeah,
Balls
there
in the
are
air.
a lot of balls in
Projects in
there.
the hopper,
There are
balls in
projects
the
in the
air.
air, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing is if there isn't the budget allocated, I don't have, or we don't have the authorization to even start on it. I can't, I call up SGM to do, can you do a title search in this? I don't have a fund source. So I gotta figure out where to pay for that. So that's why it's important that this is what we identify as the projects that we need funding. Now, and we can discuss on, some of them may not be completed or may not be at a, go to bid phase, because the fact is there's other extenuating circumstances.
Right.
So you have, your easements issues, or you have, something came back that you didn't expect, and so you
Right.
gotta regroup. And then you get into the time frame of when we're kicking these things off, and I'm going, can we get it done before the snow flies? And do we want a bad project or a good project, or am I gonna jam it down, or can I get a contractor?
Exactly.
It's all those conversations.
It's all the moving parts.
It is, and so,
A lot of moving parts.
But to that point, though, that's why we put that money up front, because it gives
Right.
us that flexibility. And I'm hearing you, I mean, there's concern about it, there's concern that, hey, it's only 40% getting done, or whatever the number was Bob just said. But that's where I think we're asking for that flexibility to say, if those dollars are up front, know that that's how we prioritize them and we get them going.
But I get that, and maybe, there's someplace in between. But to budget for the full, I'm just taking this as an example, because this is the biggest example.
The housing.
The housing is a
Sure.
big example. It's clearly gonna happen over a period of years.
Yes.
And it's a lot of money. It's $2.8 million. It's, basically half of what the CIP was.
Right.
For last year.
Right.
And to budget that entire thing in 1 year, to me, it doesn't.
And if you remember when we talked about it last year.
It doesn't make sense.
Well, and it was a political statement, partial.
Well, yeah,
To say,
okay,
yep, this is our highest priority, let's put the money behind it, and we could say it's where the most money is allocated, and it's been the most difficult to get off the ground so far this year. This was budgeted a year ago, we didn't know how quick it was gonna be to get the conceptual plan that's now done, completed,
Mhm.
to get the next set of architectures done, and I still couldn't tell you how much we're gonna be able to spend through the rest of this year.
And at that time, we didn't know if we were going to actually be building a project or
Mhm.
buying a
Right.
project.
Right. So there's a couple of different options, and I hear you loud and clear, but I think that's the perfect example to use, is we took it as a political number, go forth and
Mhm.
solve some things, and so over the course of the budget cycle, we looked at buying property, the property on Carriageway, we looked at a number of different things, we said, you know what, let's come back, let's do the conceptual work in Rodeo. This budget was used to do that conceptual work, and now this budget is being used to bring on the architect to finish the construction plans and whatnot.
Well, there's another step in there that I don't know where we are. This is one of those approve something, but I don't know where we are. There seems to be some steps towards approving a housing project when you don't know if we're going to have access to Lot E or whatever that lot is down at Horse Ranch.
Mhm.
I don't know where their board is up in Horse Ranch for approval or not approval. I'd love to look at the housing guidelines again. I mean, there's a lot of issues that go into approving a number that size. So I don't know where we are with Horse Ranch. I don't know
I mean,
if,
I can tell you.
After my HOA meeting, I can tell you that I don't think that's gonna happen.
oh, see,
So those are 4 buildings, and I don't have the map in front of me, I'm sorry, but there was 22 units, 27 units, 17 buildings and 24 units, is that right? And so in that conceptual plan, we
Okay.
used property that was owned by Horse Ranch HOA, 4 buildings on that. And we said we wanted to be able to show the maximum number of units that we thought was reasonable, and is kind of a master development plan. And that's a good example. We didn't know what was gonna be approvable and what was not. We showed that to the Horse Ranch president, and he brought it to the HOA last week or 2 weeks ago for a broader discussion, and actually I just met with them yesterday and got the official, no, we don't wanna move forward using our property right now. I didn't get in writing, I got it verbally. So those are things that, those 4 units, or those 4 buildings, 8 units, we will not design for now. I shouldn't say probably, we will not design for now. But we needed to get that conceptual idea put forward to start that discussion. We've had that discussion, and now there's the other 13 units, 13 buildings that we'll work towards and get the architects up and going on
so
those.
is the number a good number here for 13 buildings versus the whole enchilada?
So we think it's close, but what will likely happen with this project, and this goes back to, this is a tougher project for sure. We will get the design going. We know the design's gonna be affordable within this money, there's no doubt. And then at that point, when we put it out to bid and we get a contractor on board, we'll be able to tune these numbers in. And if it's high, fantastic. And if it's low, this might be one of those projects that I have to come back in the middle of the next year and say, here's what it looks like. But it's our best estimate at this point. This one is tougher because of all the moving parts in it.
That's got a lot of moving parts on
There's
this
the
one.
subsidy, how much subsidy does the council
Yep.
want to do? The timing over the years, the number of, how are we gonna phase it? This is our most complicated project, for sure, as far as those types of issues go. A lot of the other projects that are in here are a little bit more,
Cut and dry.
cut and dry, to use Ann's words. And so, to that example is, I think, a good reason why we put a lot of money up front, and we would ask for that flexibility to know that we might not get it all spent in 1 year, and that's why we try and project those carryovers for the housing one. For a paving project, I'm trying to find another project in here that's a good example. Skate park improvements, whatever, we're confident we can get those ones done. The bus stop, which is not the Meadow Ranch bus stop, 124 grand for carryover. That project's been here since before I started, and there's a lot of property ownership issues that they continue to try to work through. It's not a complicated construction project, but it's complicated with the ownership underneath. And no one anticipated.
Town council never approved the Meadow Ranch crossing that I know of, that I sit on council.
The Meadow Ranch.
Or Meadow, where we're talking about.
Meadow Ranch bus stop?
Yep,
It's been in the budget every year I've been here.
well, you've been here, but I don't, did
For
we
four-
approve?
For
did we
4
approve
years,
it?
at least 3 years, the council's approved this budget line item.
Huh?
For this 120, this 137, if you're looking at the
This-
Meadow Ranch bus stop, that was absolutely in the 2017 budget, if that's what we're talking about, if we're saying the same thing. And I know it was in the 20,
Oh, the Meadow Ranch, okay, that's a little
Across
different.
from Fairway 3.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
but I mean, that is not a complicated project,
No, it's
as far as construction goes. But the underlying land ownership is it takes people playing ball. I mean, up until this year, the Fairway 3 project,
Yes.
the paving, again, not a complicated paving project, but trying to get all the adjacent landowners.
That's complete now.
Done.
Yes,
And we went over $30,000. Is that
No.
correct?
it was 90. Go ahead.
That's the
We actually-
projected carryover.
So actually,
What are we
There's-
looking at?
3 projects in there, the Fairway 3.
Hard surface trail improvement.
Yeah, so the hard surface trails is basically this line item, we've identified that we've got surface treatments that we need to deal with on all of our hard surface trails, and we're trying to allocate money every year, and we're going through right now as a master prioritization schedule. Before that was the conversation on the Fairway 3, and that project, and I don't have but it came in, you know, don't see it here, but it came in under budget, and I was able to request to use it towards hard surface trails, because it is a hard surface trail.
You know, there's a lot of people, I'm making an assumption. There's a lot of people watching our session, and that may be incorrect, or it may be correct. There could be one person. But I think it's important that people know what we're talking about. We're jumping all over the
We
place,
are,
guys.
and we can
need to-
step right through them.
Let's go through facilities, land
Sure.
improvement. Let's do this orderly, okay?
Yep,
Okay.
Is everybody fine with that? Okay,
Yes.
Fine.
okay. You wanna lead
me
off
kick it
right
off?
at the top?
Yep.
Yep.
so I'll just kind of basically give you a overview of what the project is and, you know, what the status is. And then if you have specific additional questions, we can dive into it more details. But the marketing reconfiguration improvements is actually the town hall project to deal with space needs in the marketing and tourism department. It has been in the budget since 2016, and we expended some money just on conceptual design in 16, and we're requesting to carry that into next year because we haven't touched it since. Basically, we've been dealing with exterior hard surface type of projects. So that was the one that we're asking to take it into 18.
Okay.
Town Park Station Concrete Project, that is a project that has been identified for a few years, and that is basically down at Town Park Station, and it is, we've got some aging concrete and
Yep, we
that.
sure do.
And we've been looking at different treatments, whether it's maintenance or whether, you know, so your snow removal contracts.
Right.
Or whether it is putting in snow melt. And so we have gotten to design on that, and we've figured that out. But at this point, talking to David, we're gonna request to carry that forward to next year, in the sense that we're at the late juncture, and we'd like to look at the operations side of it, because we wanna make sure the cost-benefit ratio of that is the right use of the funds. No matter what, we do have concrete issues, so we'll make that decision next year on whether it would have the snow melt in it or not the snow melt in it.
So, Ann, explain, if you would, how, well, I think I understand how it's different, but down below, under roads and streets, there's a pedestrian improvement at Town Park.
Yep,
Now,
different project.
It's a different project.
Yep.
One is road, one is sidewalk?
Correct. So the Town Park Station snow melt project
Yeah,
is the building, the Town Park Station, when you get off the buses there for the shuttle,
Yeah.
and you walk underneath, like you're gonna walk to the recreation center,
Yep.
there's that concrete surface there,
Yes.
and then you walk down the stairs. That is getting scaled and chipped, and there's a lot of foot traffic in there. And so David and his staff have been trying to figure out how to, one, deal with the aging infrastructure, and two, what's the best solution for that in the long run. So that's that project.
There's not existing snow melt in there
No.
now.
No. So it's a snow removal contract. We contract service it as well as in-house. So I apologize if our names aren't clear. I try to keep them somewhat clear, but we do move around a little bit on the titles. So parcel C restrooms remodel, that one's done. That was a 16 project. And nothing further on that one. Meadow Ranch Bus Stop is the one we were just talking about. That's the bus stop across from Fairway 3. So currently, there's no formalized bus stop. Buses have historically dropped off the
Right.
patrons wherever they want, and there's some driveway concerns. There's been some conversations with that homeowners association, and so we've talked about the concept of moving it towards that green space right before, right across from Anderson Ranch. So it's a little bit right by the driveway that goes up the gravel road that goes up, and basically formalizing that bus stop with a shelter and pull out concrete sidewalk, and would line up, the crosswalks would line up to the other bus stop, which is the preferred alignment for transit, because they're offset a little bit and the pedestrians can get from one point to
Is
the
there
other point.
support from their HOA?
There is, but it's the fine tuning on the negotiations. So we just finished the soil borings right before Labor Day. We got the report on that. There was some revisions that weren't in the original design, so we're going back to the design just to make sure we can build that within the easements and what we're talking about and finalizing that. So right now, we have it projected so that you could see the budget was 137,500, and we've spent money on design, and so the carry forward would be what the construction project would be next year. 18 project is, David, do you want to talk about this one? The Raft to Depot. This is the design.
David, come on up. I'm sure everyone wants to say hello to you.
It's just,
It's the request from EOTC for design for,
it's to start the mall.
Hi, council. We're gonna be going to EOTC in October, asking them for 300,000 to begin another study of what we can do as a measure to improve the guest experience and the service for RAFTA and the local village shuttle up in the mall area. The 50,000 here, I'm drawing a blank on.
It's basically conceptual, to start talking about this design again on combining the Rafta bus stop and the Daily Lane bus stop and how that all looks in that area. So back to your conversation on the comp plan, this ties into that conversation, but it also means that we need to put money in the budget. We're recommending put money in the budget so we can start looking at some of these concepts. Otherwise, we don't have any funding to start looking at that whole
So
thing.
let me ask you this, just to play devil's advocate. So we understand there's due diligence going on for the mall.
yes.
That's moving towards being completed. It would appear to me that it may be money poorly spent to redesign, spending $300,000 to go out for a study when we don't know what the new owner, if there is a new owner, what he or she wants to do.
But it's not, it's 50, not 300. David was
I
talking to
heard the
you.
number 300,000 going
What's-
to EOTC for funding.
It's 50 is what we're
I
asking.
see that, but then I heard the number 300.
Okay, it's 50. 300 would be in the future if we went forward for design, further design. But I agree, we wouldn't just go design for design's sake. If there was some due diligence and if there was a new owner, this would be a great opportunity for us to join in a public-private partnership with them to say, what are you guys doing up here? What are your plans for the remodel? Assuming there's gonna be a remodel, you just don't buy it and own it. But if you're gonna make some kind of change up here and you're gonna do something different, what can we do with the land we own to make this thing work better and meet our needs as well? And I think that's the kind of stuff that this would be used for. It's not gonna be just a design for design's sake. And the 300 number that David, I think, used, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, is we talked about going with a bigger number to begin with, and we said, you know what? We need to start back and do a more scaled-back version of what is even possible, what should we be looking at? And then once we kind of get some agreement on that with whoever the ownership's gonna be and that coordination, then in years future, then that number is gonna escalate, because we've got $6 million and roughly $6 million in EOTC money to do this improvement with, to do this determinants for this regional service. And again, using that rule of thumb of 10% for design, 300 would be about half that design, and this is to kick that off.
So what we're also suggesting then, Clint, is the transit center that was designed quite a few years ago, we just throw that plan out,
No, I don't think we throw anything out.
because that was a pretty darn good plan.
Pretty darn good plan, but a pretty darn expensive
It was a very
plan.
expensive plan.
So, I don't want to call it paralysis through analysis, but this is a bit of a chicken and egg kind of thing of what is the developer going to do and what are we going to do? And you have a facility that now dates back to
Oh, it's
1970s. Yes, it's ancient, and in need of some improvements just to make the amenities for the users of the system, whether they're guests, employees, or residents. It's about time we made a stab at that, because this is going to probably drag on for another 20 years or something like that. So, having said that, the 6 million, it's always been my philosophy that I'm not going to spend it just to spend it because the money's use it or lose it.
right.
And so it's taken a lot of willpower to resist doing that, given the nature of the EOTC kind of situation, and the obsession with lockboxes and that sort of thing. But I think if we make investments in that site and do it well, then it's more incentive for the property owner to invest in his property and improve it as a customer amenity. Clint's right, it's a prime project for a public-private partnership,
Right.
or 3P, but, and that was what we were working on back in 2000, 2001,
Right.
when we came up with that pretty grand design, which was addressing parking and road relocation and a lot of aspects. So I don't mean to delve down into that project, but I think we're just trying to get some look at what are some of the realistic things we can do here, because just to deck out and deck over and say, hey, that'll work, well, the grade changes of Snowmelt Road make the deck difficult to deal with, and how do you circulate? So it is a big challenge, and it needs a little bit of conceptual design work to get it to a place where you might have something that's middle of the road project, not the 37 million
Which is a
project that
great project because it allowed those numbered lots to perhaps become employee housing or other type of housing.
There would have been
Yep.
other uses for those
Exactly.
pieces, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
The next one was a 2017 project and that we're requesting to carry forward. It's the Daly Lane Depot roof. It's a maintenance project, but also we're tying it in. You know we need to continue to maintain our stuff, but it's basically just one of those projects we didn't get done. I'll be honest about it. Recreation Center Pool Rehabilitation Project. This is a, stuccoing, a surface treatment on the inside of the pool. We have some water loss. We're doing a leak detection test on that, and basically, estimate is to resurface it, but we need to do a little bit more investigation work, and so that's what that project is for 2018.
So the pool is leaking?
I don't know if it's infiltration or, which way, it'd be infiltration to the groundwater or the other way in. There is some loss, and so we're trying to figure out where that loss is going.
And then how is it that you're determining the loss per gallon per day, or?
You're getting in the weeds.
Inches.
It is inches.
I mean, the real quick answer that is the pool drops in inches.
No, and they all do, but I mean.
Well,
Right, and so-
that's what we're trying to figure out. Is this a real issue or not?
Right.
And we don't know, but we didn't want to ignore it. And so this is another good example of
It may go
we
away.
we might come back in 6 months and say, you know what, we've got the investigation done and it's average.
So who's doing the investigation?
Nick Kurtz from Facilities and Andy Warline are working on this project together. And so they hire consultants.
And obviously, the worst situation is the return fitting on the bottom of the pool. So that should be the first fitting to be checked, and by blowing a balloon up and see if what you're losing now, if you don't lose as much then that's the good news, then it might be a fitting that's up closer, okay?
And it has more to do with the seasonality, from what I understand, when the groundwater, I mean, there's lots of things going
Yeah.
on, and that's what they're trying to figure it out. And we don't,
Kids jumping in the water.
There's a lot of theories, and then we're working through them right now. So
I
basically,
understand, but that's a big budget for it, but it's also, it could wind up being a big priority, because something you gotta.
and that's why we did
right.
a larger number on there, because we didn't know the answer yet, and so we have to answer this. We need to go deal with the issue.
we don't have the full scope.
Kids are just playing Marco Polo, come on.
Cannonball.
I mean, we had a similar issue with the hot tub a couple years ago, and we had to dig up you remember, we dug up some of the concrete and had to fix some fittings
Yes.
that were leaking. So it's very similar. We just don't know the answer right this second, so I can't say it's X, Y, Z.
It's been going on for how long?
Years.
A couple of years, yeah.
Wow,
So.
okay.
So, softball field design improvements, that was just some design work that Recreation was doing. There's no carry forward on that. The ice rink relocation budget for 2018 is to examine moving that from the arena to the tennis courts and the implementation of that,
And
We
lights.
looked at that before. Why is it coming back?
because we haven't had money to do it.
Well, I think we decided several years ago we didn't want to do that, and there was a good reason for it that came in from, I think it was Andy, not to do it.
If there was, I mean, that's, again,
Exactly.
this is, I mean, I don't know how much detail you guys want tonight. I was planning on doing more detail when we got into deep in the budget,
Yeah,
but
take a look at that, because we looked at this several years ago.
the major driver of this cost is lights. And so it'd be an opportunity to not have to use the rodeo lights on the ice rink, and so that we could have a much, those lights are super bright in the middle of the winter and flood everywhere. So if we could get a more directed light down, what our idea with this would be, through this year, we would get a design done, do the whole neighborhood process, and then come back and say, does this work, make sense or not,
So we would put lights in the tennis court?
essentially.
On the exterior of them.
And so the idea would be, the ice rink would fit on the concrete, it would already be level, we don't need to move all the dirt in the rodeo anymore. The full rink would fit, you'd have a better opportunity for shading, because you'd have those windbreakers up that can provide shading, and then you could have much better downcast lights that wouldn't affect the entire village that they do now.
Does two.
So
of
is
the
this,
Courts, I'm sorry.
you go.
Do two of the courts equal the square footage of the existing?
I think 3 do.
It's just gonna take.
There's 4 courts, and I think 3 fit the
I think that's
full-size
what we
ice rink.
looked at before. It went through this whole process, and this was when Jason was on council.
And this $100,000, is that for
There we
Lights,
do.
Lighting.
essentially,
Because there's not the power,
lights
no
and
lights
the
up there.
design, the whole thing?
yes.
You think you can get it done by the winter of 18-19?
That's what their
Yes.
goal is, yeah.
That's the goal?
Yeah.
Okay.
But they
winter
would
of
go through the whole process,
Yeah.
make sure people are
Go
aware of the
back and
project.
look the minutes of why we chose not to do it, but I don't remember offhand.
It might have been pushback from the the neighborhood.
No, it wasn't that. It was something about doability and engineering and, I don't remember.
But there's all that would be the analysis that would occur all
Okay.
throughout 18. And the neighborhood, we've started the discussion with the neighborhood. Their biggest feedback, the most significant feedback we got so far on that is parking. If you're gonna do it, make sure that you require parking in the not the closest parking, which is in the neighborhood, but require the parking to be in the rec center parking lot. So those are the kind of things we'd work through over the course of the next year and see what we can do.
Okay,
So no changes for the rink for this upcoming season.
No.
okay, next.
Skate park repairs, that's just some concrete repairs in the skate park.
I haven't been in there. Have you? Your son
My
has
son's
been
in there
there.
every
It's
day.
used a lot.
Yeah, it sure is.
The hard surface trails, I mentioned this earlier, but this is, the budget is, the carry forward is at 30,000. And then, we're doing the 150,000 request for 2018 to continue moving on that project.
And just to clarify, the 30,000 that's carried forward, is that because some work was not completed that was intended to be, or is that because there's money left over?
Money left over. So the contract came, what we're working through right now is going through on the list of the realistic pavement management on those trails. So we've got several trails that have been overlaid multiple times. We've been trying to we did two different type of projects. One was Fairway 3, which was a complete removal and rebuild, whereas Brush Creek Trail, we roto-milled it, ground it all up, and used that as base because of, one, we wanted to keep the material, it's a little bit more, it's more environmentally friendly to reuse that as a base. But when you start getting to these trails that have been overlaid multiple times, that's not the best method because your base isn't stable, and you start getting like an elevation creep. So that's more than you probably need to know, but we've been going through this detail on what are all these trail sections, what's our linear foot cost, what can we get done? And we just had a meeting on it this week of, we prioritized the high corridor areas, we prioritized the pavement condition index, and then it basically kind of sorts it out to what's your high trails you need to maintain or do project-wise. And then we look at our funding and we say, okay, we can do X, Y, and Z, or X. And then we are able to start articulating, okay, here's our 5-year plan. We're gonna be doing this 2018. We're gonna be doing this 19, 20.
Good.
The other side of it is looking at the trail easements and making sure everything's kosher on that side of it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're working on.
Okay,
So I can't tell you the exact project right now, because
no, that's all right.
It's a
I
nice
just wanted to
placeholder.
get clarification on the,
Nice
So,
place.
On
and
the
so we're
carry
looking at
forward.
construction methods, and then there's other sides of it, is some of them are harder than heck to get to, so we gotta look at how we're gonna access them, so it all varies.
Okay.
So, okay, Town Park Station outlet structure, that one I have the design, we have the Army Corps of Engineering permit. I'm trying to still get it out to bid, this is the ideal for construction, this is one of those rare ones that can go into winter a little bit because of low water. So as you recall, this is that repair on the breach on the pond.
Right.
Okay, so that why there's no carry forward, and it may, at the end of the closeout, we have some repair work into next year, and we'll talk about that at the end of the year. Guardrail replacement is just doing elevation changes and replacement to guardrail within the village to make sure they're in compliance, or if they're damaged, to get them back to snuff. Brush Creek, Owl Creek Road intersection improvements. This is the design dollars we were talking about for that intersection to start getting into more details so we can make better conversations on that. Fairway 3, you can see is done. Brush Creek, Sinclair, this is one of those intersection improvements. So we had 25,000 this year. I haven't started it because I'm still working on the other intersection. So I've requested the 25, or I'm requesting the 25, but I'm also adding 25 in there to have more realistic design dollars to look at that intersection, how we can improve the pedestrian crossings at Sinclair and Brush Creek Road.
Okay.
So it would be different than what was conceptualized in the connectivity plan?
Nope, the conceptual design is right, but as we start going into design dollars, that's when I got to pull in surveying crews and look at elevations, utility locates, you know, looking at all the geotechnical, what do we have out there as far as removal of sidewalk and.
well, that's one that sticks in my mind, I think, that the conceptual design that we saw a year and a half ago may not coordinate with the comp plan review. Because if I recall, there were dividers in the middle of the road, and I do remember seeing comments about people not wanting, dividers in the roads.
So you have two, you're right, there's two varying sides of whether you put a median in there for the refuge for the pedestrians, or you don't put the median in there and don't have that slowing down of the car factor. So my request would be to keep the dollars in there. We start the design in 18, but you're also working in the comp plan, so you can iron out those things on, is that the vision on those types of elements?
How soon will we see anything from the comp plan? Sooner than later, I think, is.
We've just gave them all the planning commission's comments and our comments, I think, on Friday. And there's lots. And so, we're 6 weeks, I guess, out before we get that next draft. And that's, then you gotta go through the public and,
It has to go back up to the planning commission as part of their process.
Well, so that's the next draft. That's October-ish, and then, depending on how well, assuming it comes back good, then you're gonna do all the public input process from there. So you're months out from adopting a comp plan.
And I realize that this is 2018 budget, so realistically, you're not gonna be working on this until sometime in 2018.
And so I'll give you a day in the life of the construction side of things. Ideally, you would love to start doing your design in October so that you can get ready, so that you can go to bid January, February, March, April, and have a construction season of
In the
June
following, I
through
can
October.
understand.
Right now, we're still catching up on these things. I've got enough projects in here that I won't be looking at this project until later next year. So I think there's
Say this is
ample
2019.
time and also the other thing is, so construction projects, you're definitely locked into that construction season. The design projects can kind of move around, whereas you kind of fit them in to when you can get the time to get to those projects. They're not as locked as, you could start doing design in July, you just know you won't be constructing it till the next year, so.
Right.
So this could really be bumped to 2019.
Well, I would leave it in 18 for your design, but
Yeah, you'd like
it's
to
not
get-
construction.
I'd like to see what comes out of the comp plan
Yeah, before we do this.
before you go to the design, but, okay, go
But
on.
regardless, we need to improve that intersection.
Yeah, we do need to approve it.
So our recommendation is leave it in there. It's not a top priority as far as getting it
Okay, I
for
agree.
construction, 'cause it's not budgeted
Okay.
for construction until future. We haven't even identified when construction would be on that one.
Okay.
The next one is the Town Park Station project, Brush Creek Road and Town Park Station. So this is the pedestrian improvement projects at Town Park Station. And we have design, we are out to bid, and bids come in tomorrow. So I'll have a better idea of
Good.
where we're landing, as well as when we talked about this, I don't know, a month ago or so. When we bid it, I bid it as no work can be completed after October 30th because of construction limits, but also a completion date of next July, or June 30th. So we'll see what comes in, is if even their contractors' availability and how we can, if it can be phased or whatnot. So we'll just basically have more details for, this later
And
this week.
did we skip over the Woodbridge maintenance upgrade?
Oh, sorry, I did.
Okay, and then, by the way, on that, skip over,
Did I skip
don't know
another
where
one?
we stand for the
Oh.
demo of the digital sign,
We haven't, that was basically, we've been put on hold on that
Yeah,
project.
I thought so.
Yeah.
You guys said don't touch.
But that's not a whole lot for the upgrades for the Woodbridge, is it?
So, right now, what I've asked is, we know we've got some maintenance needs on it, staining, decking materials. We also have a little bit of abutment, we put some cold patch, I believe, in the approaches to those. So, Star Jameson from the trail side and John Baker from the road side are gonna get together and look at what those are. And then if, 25 doesn't cover what their needs are, we'll identify what needs to happen, and then we'll talk about it in next year's budget, what the next phase would be, so. All right. So the next project is, the MBCX Snowmelt Implementation Design Project. That project will be complete this year. In fact, we have the plans, we're going through in the reviews. on that. And it ties into three more projects down, which is that Snowmelt Base Village Controls project. As we went through the design, we identified some of the needs on Base Village in addition to just the control side of it. So some pump replacements, VFDs that go with those pumps, so they get upsized on the pumps, as well as flushing out the glycol that's actually taking place tomorrow. So that's what the title on the Base Village Controls project is probably, it should just be Snowmelt Base Village Project. Because when we went through the design, we broke out the project as what we could get done this year and what we would be getting done in future years. So just going back to summarize the MBCX project. So that was a project that started in 2014.
Right.
We hired EEI and Clear to go through and look at all of our facilities. So that included recreation centers, public works facility, town hall, and the 4 boiler plants, to look at the energy efficiency of those facilities and what we can do, not only energy efficiency, but also how are they just operating health-wise, let's put it that way. And that's what came out of the next 3 projects we're talking about. Is the top priority projects was the Snowmelt road boilers, and then after that would be the facility projects, because the payoff on the facilities projects, they're newer, it wasn't as great as a payoff, and so there was a large ticket on all these projects. So and I'll skip over Upper Town Hall, we'll come back to that. So the recommendation is to chunk it into 2 boiler plants for 2018 of Lot 2 boiler replacement project and the Parcel C boiler replacement project. And basically, it's doing a couple things. It's putting in redundancy in the boilers, and it's not dealing with Snowmelt Road. It's dealing with the plants that operate Snowmelt Road. Redundancy, efficiency, and just bringing them back up to current conditions of what we need as far as efficiency.
So none of this sits on Base Village homeowners, correct?
No, none of it does.
Okay.
Yep, good question. So that's what that 491,000 and that 593,000
Well, that's a
projects
staggering
are.
number.
Can they be done at the same time, or they
Yep.
have to?
They can.
Yep.
So we'll look at
done.
bidding them together. But we didn't want to bite off all 4 boiler plants at once. It's just too much staff-wise, and also troubleshooting, bringing it up to speed and all that, just
So
too.
is there 2 more to go in
There will be
19?
19, there would be top of the village, and then 20 will come back to Base Village. And the Base Village one's a little bit different than the other ones, because it's dealing with what's going on in the manholes. Their controls are in the manholes, and there is basically a water issue and a corrosion issue, and so we need to kind of look at how we're gonna pull that out and what are we gonna do. So that's why that's off in 2020. So we dealt with the not like emergency needs, but the needs that we need right now, pressing needs for 2017, which is the Base Village project.
I'm glad we're not in a recession.
Yeah.
Well, so just to talk about that, Mary Ann knows how many hours I spent on these. But, we have the SGM reserve funds. And so we've been setting aside funds for all of our facilities. And I went through and looked at what we've been setting aside for these boilers. And we're doing an early draw on these boilers. But then also, and you can give credit to Mary Ann, she goes, prove it out to me that you can pay for it and when it needs to be replaced in another 20 years. So I went through the whole 2039, when those are life expectancies need to be replaced to make sure we have the funds set aside in the future.
Can Holy Cross be used for these?
Energy efficiency, so yes, there's a couple avenues. So when I put these in, these are worst case scenarios. I'm hoping to come back and say, okay, here's our bids, and then also pursue the energy efficiency grants. So there's core grants we can go for.
Okay.
There is Black Hills Energy. We can get dollars for that, even though those are kind of drying up a little bit. But so when I budget these, I don't budget that's a fund source, because I don't have authorization one yet, and I don't drive projects by grants.
Okay.
So we go and we try to get the projects, make sure we can get it funded, and then I like coming back and saying, hey, by the way, we got this, let's put it back into the reserve, or put it back into whatever
Okay.
is the right mechanism. So there's a couple other. And then the other part of it is we didn't plug in here, the cost savings on these is that
Right,
there is a
right.
payback
That's
of
gonna
8
be my
years.
question.
So hopefully it will reduce our energy costs on some of these these general fund or road fund expenditures. So
Did they give you an idea what that cost savings might be?
there was an 8-year payback, and I can't remember the exact dollar is what we'll see, but that's what they were quoting. So, and then the facilities were more of like a 10 or to 13-year payback. So that's why we said, okay, let's focus our efforts on this. Any other questions on those?
Nope.
Okay. Town hall entry, that is just actually the upper town hall entry. It's basically a safety concerns on looking at additional lighting and some just infrastructure in there with concrete conditions. And just on the side note, I am gonna jump around for ya. 800 megahertz project down below. That project will be complete this year. That's at 600,000.
Going on behind us.
Yep, so that's gonna be wrapped up by the end of the month, and then some of that infrastructure back there has been damaged. That's their obligation to fix that,
Okay.
so. Clint, I'll let you do with the community plan. Can you do those?
Yep. So community plan is, our best guess is we'll be rolling over $16,000. You see that going forward, it's continuation of the project. And then this entryway plan is what we anticipate getting some detail on what will look like down at the entryway. What's gonna happen with the rodeo? Does the orientation go instead of north, south, east, west? Parking, extra fields, kind of some implementation of the poster ideas and that conceptual design. But that is absolutely a follow-up to the comp plan. The comp plan needs to be done first before that goes.
The next one is a stormwater management plan. So when you do go through the comp plan, you'll see probably some comments about stormwater management. We are not required by federal government to have a stormwater management plan, but it is in our efforts to make sure we're doing the right thing as far as making sure properties are doing their stormwater management, but also to go through and inventory what we have out there so that we're prepared for debris flows or things like that.
Well, it hits all our environmental concerns the council's identified as, I mean, this is a great way for us to address that.
So that's what that is a planning document to basically start either surveying, using the GIS, trying to identify where they're all at, doing an inventory of the systems and making sure we've got a maintenance plan in the future. Parking lot licensing system is done. Marion, I'm gonna look at you for these two.
You can just jump all the way down to housing, probably.
You wanna deal with those networking ones?
The network cabling, system, that is done. What that is, was, doing connectivity between town hall, public works, transportation, and housing. There were issues with the communications and the servers. The council chambers meeting room, we just signed that contract. That's to improve all the audio visual here in the council chambers. And then the municipal fiber network, we're anticipating carrying that over into next year. That project, I think Doug wants to do some planning on to see, you know, we know that we've got the broadband that's coming up on the ballot, and so this is kind of like from the town standpoint, from a municipal standpoint, what types of things can we do to improve, whether it's wireless, whether it's putting down conduits under the road, or what's the best system for the municipality.
Okay.
So that's more planning money.
And then I touched on the 800 megahertz already. I think we've talked about the Brush Creek Palisade is just finishing up the outstanding items that you can see on the right-hand side there, the miscellaneous things. And then the housing opportunities we just talked about previously, about those dollars for those future projects. Solid waste management plan, I still have that on for this year. And then,
Sorry, just going back to housing, so the $50,000, are we over budget on the Brush Creek Palisade project?
No, he's asking to carry that over for these little items that he still has to do. He doesn't anticipate those things to be done before the end of the year, so he asked if we could carry over. He thinks he can't get them done, so he's anticipating he might need to come back and ask to carry over the balance of $50,000.
If it's in that carryover budget, those are budgeted funds. We're just asking to be reallocated for the next year.
we're just anticipating we
So
can't get it
but are
finished
these
or whatever.
funds,
Okay.
are these monies in excess of what the contract amount was, or
They're
are
all
they just
within the budget.
they just 50,000 less than the contract?
Correct. If it's in
Because the
that,
contract and the budget could be two different things.
Right, so he budgeted, the 226 in the revised, that's how much he had left over from the project in 2016. So he was trying to complete that project in this year.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's not going to get all the way there. So he's anticipating, well, I might not, we asked him, what do you think you're going to carry forward into the next year? And he said, can you please put in 50? He'd like to get it done, but if he can't get it done, when we come back to council in February or March with our year-end numbers, we're going to say, well, it's not 50, it's actually 20,000, or it's
Well,
actually.
Mary Ann, in the contract, not the budget, but in the contract, was there a sum of money that was, so to speak, held back until all these little things were done?
Yes.
I mean, that's typical, isn't it?
Do,
Do
Retainage.
10% retention or
Yep.
something.
Yeah.
exactly.
And some of this might, and I can't speak specifically to what this 50 is going to. I just don't know, I'm sorry.
He says,
Well-
right here, he told me gutter, heat tape, posts, valves, and flashing. He says just some miscellaneous items.
But my point was gonna be, some of that, the contract, we might be closer to being done with the contract, and this might be more work for his crews to get, or some other contractor to get this project finished. But that's the detail I can't speak to. This isn't necessarily going to FCI,
Not necessarily, no.
and that's,
Oh, I see, okay. Can we go back to the housing project for a moment? And I guess I would like to know, what is the anticipated, what's the anticipated cost or budget for 2018? Not the whole project, obviously, but what do we expect to spend in 2018?
Right, what we have in here now in the total projected for 2018 is $3 million.
But we're not gonna spend it, we're not gonna get that done.
but this is where the complication for this project comes up. If we build 10 houses, and there's
Yeah.
10 houses at $500,000 each, we need to actually front $5 million.
Okay.
And then, so we might be coming back to you with once we get those numbers
What it's gonna cost.
closer, I might be coming back to you and saying, we need to do a COP for $5 million. And for $5 million, we think we can anticipate, selling the 10 units for $400,000 or, $4 million. And therefore, their subsidy going to each one of these houses is gonna be $100,000 each.
Well,
I don't have that number yet, because that's what we're trying to get with the contractors.
I understand that. So why budget for something why put a number in that may or may not be a valid number? Just put a number in for the design. That's what we gotta do next year, right? We gotta do the design. Let's get the design done,
And then an estimate of cost.
and then an estimate of cost, and then we'll budget the estimate of cost. We can add it to the budget. I just don't see the point of budgeting something up front that we really don't know if it's how valid it is.
The validity is the political will. I mean, you get to say, hey, it's the second biggest, or actually the biggest project next year going forward, $3 million. That's the biggest validity. And otherwise, to go back and add it, it's an ordinance process. And it's not like we're preventing other projects from going forward because of this. And it's an order of magnitude issue. What is the right number? I mean, is this close to what we're willing to spend or not?
Well, I don't know if you want to, the argument on political will, we'd like to see it done, but I don't think that requires a number.
Well, I don't see the drawback to it. I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Because what tends to happen is we put a number in, and all of a sudden it becomes carry-forward issue, and once with the design comes in, and an estimate of cost, it may be cost prohibitive. And you haven't gone through a public process to say that's what people want.
But that's what the budget is. I mean,
It's not in my book, but go ahead.
but $3 million, are we willing to spend $3 million on this project?
I may be willing to spend 5. I don't know what the number is. That's the point is, we don't know what the design is, what the cost might be, and I have difficulty approving a $3 million line item when the number may be 5 or 6 or 2. It's one of those.
Yeah, honestly, why is this any different than an intersection configuration, where we budget for the design, the design comes back, we get an opportunity to discuss it and review it and whatever, and we get a budget for what the construction is, and we get an opportunity to approve it. I don't see why this should be any different.
wait a second, but in the same token, if we have this money budgeted and something comes around, the plans change, and we're all in agreement about housing, and then maybe come June, all of a sudden, we want to start breaking ground because our plans have changed, this money's in the budget.
It
So
it only takes a month to get it in the budget, if it's not there.
well, I mean, I don't know how long it takes to get it in the budget, but
Takes a month.
it doesn't do any,
Two
it doesn't do us any harm to have it here and then roll it over to something else. I don't see the harm of it, but, I mean, if it takes 30 days to get in the budget, I understand that now, I guess, but I find that hard to believe it's gonna take $3 million, $5 million, 30 days to get in the budget. Am I wrong?
It's not that hard.
It's an ordinance, you know,
It's an ordinance.
it's an ordinance. Clint
readings.
says it's an ordinance, you have 2 readings, and there you go.
But we don't seem to go through 2 readings in a 30-day period.
Could.
You can.
Okay, all right. I didn't see the harm of having it in the budget because it's.
And that's
not-
how we
it's not-
can-
It's not lost, it's not locked up. What's the difference? I mean, you know.
It looks, I tell you what I hear in the village, is you approve funds, but you don't know what the item in and what's gonna look like, and we, the taxpayers, are paying, we're paying into the town, and then we come back, it's not a $3 million, it's a $6 million project, and why didn't you guys budget correctly?
And I just
That's
wanted
a
to,
political issue.
But that's the thing, that you're gonna have my commitment. That's not what's happened. We would come back, when we've got a contract, when we know what the project is, we'll come back and say, here's how we're gonna make this fit or not. With every other project we've done, in my short time of being here, we've said, here's the number, here's the contract, it fits. We haven't just started a rolling contract to say, here
My
it
issue,
goes.
Clint, how do you know 3 million's a good number?
It's the political number and honestly, that, if you remember where that number came from, when this number started, it was, hey, that's what we can buy some property on Snowmass with. That's where, it was 2.8. And then we said, you know what, we did the evaluation, the council put the money in the budget, we did the evaluation and said it's not worth it. One, we couldn't get the price at 2.8, and 2, even if we could, it was gonna be a stretch to worth it. So it was a budgeted amount, and we said, we all discussed and said, nope,
Right,
no
right,
go.
Agree with that on that project.
And so,
too.
but that's a good example of, just because it's budgeted doesn't mean we spend it. So then we said, okay, we've got these dollars, how else can we spend that? How else can we meet that goal of building more housing for the council? That was the strategic goal set. And then we identified this project down in Rodeo, and we've done the conceptual planning and spent however many couple $1,000 we've spent this year. And we anticipate spending considerably more over the next several months to get this up to that number. And I guess I would say that's the beauty of having it, is we know that we're working towards that strategic goal.
So having that money in the budget, so when it comes to a design situation, we don't necessarily have to have a design number in there, does it? Or you
Yeah,
can
you
just
put-
draw from the 3 million?
That's what we're doing,
That's
yes.
what they do now, but
Right.
I would like to see a design number.
So
And
what would
if you
that
wanna
number
use
be?
10%, use 10%, but that's the design number. And then come back and review the design and then move the next step and go do it step by step.
Is there any disadvantage to doing it that way?
It slows processes down. I mean, I know a month is 30 days, but when you're starting to, if you guys identify this as a goal that you want to keep moving forward and things seem agreeable, if you don't have that budget, you can't schedule that meeting, then go to the next phase of, okay, the check-in with council, this is appropriate, yes, we want to continue to move forward. It just basically slows up that whole process.
$3 million of town money, 30 days is not a big deal.
Better go slow.
can I
Make
point,
sure you got
point something out?
buy-in.
Though the
All right.
2017 revised budget was 2.8 million.
Yep.
And so we're showing the projected carryover of 2.5 million. You don't have to make a decision on that until we come back in February or March. By then, they may have some design plans that'll tell you what that number's going to be and whether it's 3 million or 5 million. The only amount that we currently have in the 2018 budget is 450,000. So the 300 from the 2.8 to the 2.5 was so that Joe could get started on some design plans and all of that, and then there was an additional 450 next year as well. So you don't have to make that decision right now or
Right.
during the budget process on the big chunk.
Big chunk.
big chunk.
big number. Okay. So we can make that, we need to sleep on it. But it would take about $450,000 in next year to do the design work.
Whatever is
That
done
four
this
fifty is
year.
taking that number to the 3 million. That is our backup envelope
That was just
estimate
backed
of
in.
what the subsidy is gonna be for the units to get
That
constructed.
was just a back-end number.
Yeah, it's a back-end number, that's fair to say.
Okay, we'll talk about it in the budget meeting.
Okay, the next item is just the town hall trash recycling dumpster shed. We're looking at moving the operations from interior of the garage to get better use of the garage, putting one out in the parking lot where the police department parks. So it's a bear-proof enclosure. And then lastly is the product enhancement from Snowmass Tourism. I'm gonna let you talk on that one.
I mean, we take $100,000 from each budget annually for the last couple of years and put it in for future capital projects. And this current year, we've used them for trail development. In future years, we could use it for such things as the Skittles, but we're setting aside $200,000 a year to hit a significant product improvements.
So what was the 200 spent on last year?
The full 200 wasn't spent. 100 and I'm looking to Mary Ann, if you remember.
85 right here. 16, it's 85.
Well, 160.
Trails essentially. The
Trails.
Discovery Trail, Village Bound Reconstruction, and Connector Trail were the three largest expenditures from that.
So connector was on that as well?
I'd have to go back and double check.
Discovery Trail and then the Village Bound reroute.
That's this year.
That's
And then,
this year.
and then Connector was last year.
Mhm.
So I'm getting my 17 is this year, in this case, and 16 not. Yeah.
One of the items I thought we talked about when SKICO came in and did their presentation on the additional miles of mountain biking and all the stuff going on up there about building some new trails linking into the town. And that was going to be assigned over to the poster committee. Do we have any work being done on additional trails?
Yes, but I don't remember how that ties into SKICO's.
Well, what we were talking about was so many more bikes, mountain bikes, up on the SKICO property.
Oh, right.
And then entering into town property to decrease some of that congestion or.
On Tom Blake.
Yeah. on
Yeah,
Tom
no, and
Lake
that's-
is
and
one
that's-
example.
And that's where we said, how do we solve this? This is very difficult on Tom Blake to solve, and we don't have a solution for that right now. Because, I mean, all those trails are essentially end right there, and if you're
That's
gonna go
exactly
downhill
right.
further, there's far more traffic on that. I know there's a couple ideas out there. There's a banded trail that was created a year or two ago that's been since removed, because it didn't hit the Forest Service standards and design and planning and whatnot. But I think, as I recall, that was an issue we wanted to work with SKICO on, because they're helping to create that problem, so how do we jointly solve that? If we were to do something, these would be dollars we could apply
Okay,
towards that.
that's-
Skittles, any kind of product improvement, these dollars are set aside for.
Yeah, I just think all of us need to have the foresight to think about the mountain biking trails relative to hiking trails, and with the development over here in Bass Village, more people here, we've got to get ahead of the planning on the trail system. And it doesn't have to be a budget item for next year, but thinking out over multi-year budgeting, we really need to think about it.
Yeah, I'd talk to Andy. I have some ideas about how to manage traffic on Tom Blake. I think it's pretty doable. So hopefully we can get hikers and bikers separated over there.
That's great, Bill. Are you in the poster committee?
I'm involved.
There's good. Because you know the issues quite well. Okay. Anything else that we need to talk about relative to budget?
So the FAB will see the proposal a week from tomorrow, I believe, right? And then you guys will see the draft. The charter requires it comes from the town manager. You'll see that draft and the FAB recommendations starting October 2nd, which is a normal council meeting. It'll just be an initial review on the 2nd, and I don't have the full schedule in front of me, but I think the 13th is when you all scheduled a half-day to,
9 to 1.
to go over. 19th?
No, I
No.
said from 9 to 1.
9 to 1, on the 13th. And so we've got different meetings, you know, time set aside, depending on how you, what is it you guys want to focus on. If you say, hey, we want to really dive into these projects, you know, I'll make sure the right staff is here. If there's other projects you want to dive into, I just need to get some heads up from you all on which staff to have here so we can understand, answer questions that you've got and make sure you're comfortable with it. I mean, it's, as I said to begin with, I think I said it, maybe I didn't, but it's $29 million. I mean, it's a big budget, and so we need to make sure that you guys are comfortable with it.
29 million?
That's our revenues, annual revenues.
Yeah? And what are you projecting in terms of expenses next year?
31.
Another deficit budget?
It's
Because it's
using reserves.
Because it's capital investment. I mean, the ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses match up. But it's these projects, I mean, this is the stuff that we went over last year, but these projects are the ones that we spend down and we make sure that we're not, that we're building, that we're not overly decreasing our surpluses and reserves. And that's what you'll see that we're taking a lot of the reserves up. Marketing reserves can go from 15% to 25%. Group sales is gonna do that. General funds maintaining at 25%. And that's why we think we're in a good spot to make a lot of these investments.
It's gonna be a tough sell for me to do another year of deficit budgeting, but we'll see. Okay, anything else? Any updates? I have a question, and it ties back into last week's meeting with, on the news about ACES. And this gets into not having time to go back and look at the timelines associated with completion dates for the Discovery Center. If I remember correctly, and this is where you walk down memory lane and you don't remember everything, the completion date for that was to be 2018?
The building?
Yes.
November of 2018, yes.
Okay, so it's up here. Now we're gonna start through a process which could be the think tank, which I think I've heard some energy from within the community of people interested in, let us come together to participate. Your memo had a letter of intent and then also the RFP issue. If I put all that together and let's suggest an RFP, no board would be willing, I don't know any nonprofit board willing to have about a month to turn around an RFP, plus financials, plus blah, blah, all that, and have it back into the town. So I appreciate the idea of a letter of intent, but what we're gonna have is the financial wherewithal from those boards to come back in with what a plan might be. So looking at the timing, I'm not sure it's appropriate now to hold East-West to penalties for completion of 2018. Now that we've got to go through a process if we are to keep 2016, or keep Building 6 within being some type of I don't know what facility. I don't know about, have you thought about those timelines and that process?
Well, what they're required to deliver is the white box, the shell.
Here's my issue. That building was designed by Harry for basically one purpose. If you're going to put multi-purposes in there, it may not be the right design. So to build a building that we don't know what we're going to use it for, to me, then comes back into, then is the town going to pay for retrofitting maybe 5 or 6 different organizations, and maybe not, or maybe, I think it's money poorly spent in terms of starting the structural steel when you don't know what you're going to put in there. That's my thinking.
So are you basically saying you don't want to hold east-west to the,
Performance and a penalty.
I understand that, but and then what are some of our options? We could possibly put a for sale sign on this building,
You could,
right?
you could have an RFP out there, and that's one option, which you get,
So
let's
why-
say there's 5 different organizations that are interested.
So if we were to put a for sale sign on this building right now, and while we're going through the process, and people or the community knows that it's a possibility we could sell this building and the money be used at a community purpose for another reason. And then let East-West off the hook, as you say, for the penalty as well. I don't see the difference in either one of them.
Yeah, but to me, they both start with not starting the building. Don't start construction, because whether we sell it or whether we don't, and we try to figure out what to put in it, we don't know what the end use of that building is gonna be, and whether the design is the most appropriate design for whatever the end use is.
The only problem with not starting the building is it kind of interrupts the phase 2 completion situation, because that building is also a gateway to the plaza,
It sure is.
okay? So we're gonna shoot ourselves in the foot even if we don't create the shell or accept the shell, or,
Well, I like to think of it as we're gonna protect an asset that the town's gonna own by waiting until we know what that is going to be used for, and designing it for the appropriate, for the use.
I understand that, but I don't see this, I don't see the harm also in put a for sale sign on it right now while we're waiting to figure it out.
I don't see a harm in that either. Matter of fact, from my perspective, the more things we could be doing simultaneously, the better, because as we found out in the past, nothing is happening quickly. I mean, it takes time for these organizations to make decisions and to, be able to figure out what they can or can't do. I don't think we can afford the situation where we have kind of relied on one path and waited 6 months and only to find out that path wasn't gonna work. Now we have to rely on, now I think we have to approach every possible path we can think of and see which path seems to take us to the best place.
It's not that, ACES may go find several other partners, we don't know. But we've gotta be able to have more than, this is what it is. And if that is what it is, then the question is the community gonna support that is? We don't know.
Well, I understand, but, how much would we hold up that shell if, I guess we need to find out how long we could hold the shell up. Maybe we need to have that conversation with East-West in regards to.
Have you had any conversations with East-West in terms of construction deadlines? And my understanding, the structural steel is about to be ordered or has been ordered.
I don't know about the steel. I'm meeting with them tomorrow with the way they're operating is they've got an obligation from the approval, December 15 approval, to deliver the building. They got architectural approval whenever the architectural approval was given, and that they're going to deliver that box that for us to fill however we feel we want to fill it. And they want to play ball. They're very dedicated to make sure that, because they're vested to make sure that thing happens well. But they're moving to make sure that obligation is met, because that's what the PUD says. They have to meet that obligation.
Well, we all anticipated we'd have a positive response from ACES.
Yeah, I think for me, the question is, do you just want to see any sort of organization in there? The
That's an
building-
RFP.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, is that what we really want? I mean, you want the red brick of Aspen in the base village? Like, I mean, I think the intent is that we wanted a place to showcase the discovery and climate change and all these things. And that's not happening. And maybe if ACES can partner with other people, it may happen. But I don't know that I just want to open it up to whoever. I mean, I don't know that that's really the point.
Well, that's the reason why you rely on an RFP to see. You could do a letter of intent to see who's interested with some criteria, then narrow it down to an RFP to come in from selected organizations. And it could be a combination of ACES, Aspen Science Center. It could be the group from Indianapolis. I don't know. I don't know where we are with any of that, because it was kind of a shock last Monday. I mean, we knew about it a couple days ahead of time, but it was like a big blow. So here's what you might want to think about, sitting on council, is if you have a meeting with East-West tomorrow, approach the discussion about delaying the delivery date or the construction, and what does that look like?
Well, and to that end, you're saying change the design.
It could change the design. Let's say,
Potentially.
who knows, maybe Anderson Art Ranch will show up and they want to put creative studios that people can participate. Maybe it's Jazz Aspen wants to open a small jazz cafe, we've heard performing arts, we've heard a lot of stuff, but to rely on unilaterally, this is what the design is, and this is the single purpose of that building, I think is a huge mistake on the part of this government.
Which part of the mistake are you referring to?
I don't
That-
wanna
that-
see a
that we
building
accepted the
built-
building?
I mean, we all love the design, but we all thought the design was to put
A purpose.
a purpose that we thought we were gonna have. Well, we're not having that purpose right now until they reorganize, and that still may not happen. But if it were to be restaurants or what have you, you got that stairway going down through the middle, and you have no windows, basically, I don't think it's a wise use of money.
Well, I don't think all is lost yet. I think the conversation with East-West in regards to how much time we could buy, and let it be known that the building's for sale and somebody can
Yep.
come in and redesign it.
I'm fine with putting it up for sale as an option. I'm also very interested in an RFP.
Okay.
RFI, or a letter of intent, or a letter of interest, I should call it letter of interest. And then RFP.
If you put it for sale, it has to be used for a community purpose, right?
No, you can sell it and take the money and put,
Put the money towards
Put the
another
community purpose someplace else.
Right.
So you can, okay.
yes, yeah.
And you put the Aqua Center back in.
Yeah, maybe the base village residents want to get together and make themselves a pool.
I don't know, I just think that conversation has to be had with Andy, and I know it's on the, I think there was a discussion for next Monday on the agenda, wasn't there?
I mean, we've got a draft, and I didn't make copies, so I didn't know if we're gonna talk about it tonight, but we've got the letter, we would call it when we wrote it a year ago, it was an RFP, so who's gonna go out? We've since modified it for a request for letters of interest, and it's basically, written such that, to your point, that people don't have time to respond, let's find out who wants to play ball on whatever. And so we would put this out from the Indianapolis Children's Museum to Aspen Science Center to ACES to whoever
Science Museum.
could send us, and we were asking for financial information and what would you plan on doing and who have you partnered with successfully, and there's probably 8 questions that we've asked them to respond to, with showing the design of the building as it is approved right now.
I wouldn't use the design of the building as is.
Well, okay. I mean, and again, that's the stuff that you guys are gonna have to make the decisions on, but I do know that, East-West has been approved to construct this building.
Understood, that can be undone.
I think what we're attempting to do is put that approval on hold.
I think we're gonna, Well, I think there has to be some
I think you're
conversation.
trying to amend the development agreement.
Okay,
I don't think you're putting anything on hold.
okay.
You're in agreement with them that they have to construct it by that date.
Yelling at you for the mic.
I don't care, I can't talk any louder.
Put the mic closer.
He's a sick boy. I understand where John's going with this, so.
Okay.
You know, really, if you're gonna bring these subjects out of the blue at a special meeting, it'd be one thing at a work session, but you're discussing this with,
I'm just asking a question.
well, I've heard from 4 of you, I'd call that a discussion rather than you asking a question. We can argue about the semantics, but, if you're gonna discuss these public matters without notice to the public that you're gonna discuss them, you're not complying with open meetings.
I understand the question. The question my question was, is there a date?
And that was answered real quick, November 1st, 2018.
But I'm also asking about construction steel.
What I've got on the agenda for next week is this request for intent to make sure that you guys are comfortable with it. We can get, if you want it out sooner, I'm comfortable,
No,
it's pretty
no,
solid.
it needs to go through that process, but now it becomes time.
So we've got this thing drafted up. You'll see it on your packet for Monday for approval to get out. And there's the blanks in there about timeline. Because we don't know what the timeline is, how quickly anybody wants to turn anything around. But that's what we've got on your agenda for Monday.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
David's been patiently waiting.
David, come on up. This is the OTC.
Thank you, council. As you're all aware, we have an EOTC meeting and a RAFTA board retreat coming up here on the 14th. You received your EOTC packets on Friday, so you hopefully have those at your disposal. As my memo or council agenda summary indicates, the main items that will be presented to you on the 14th are a little update on the EOTC budget year-to-date. You'll have the presentation by the Aspen Community Forum on their work. Markey was part of that group, looking at mobility alternatives for traffic mitigation, mostly targeting the entrance to Aspen. You'll have a bit of a presentation from the Aspen Mobility Lab, which is sort of an offshoot of the interest in looking for simpler, low-cost alternatives to improve traffic congestion in the entrance to Aspen. Part of the recommendation out of both groups, the Community Forum and the Mobility Lab, will be a regional transportation planner, if you will, that is someone or an entity that will continue to shepherd these various projects forward, because they're sort of combinations of public-private cooperative ventures in some cases. They involve negotiations with, say, Uber or Lyft or an apps designer to build this ride-sharing platform. So that'll be part of the discussion that comes out in the EOTC meeting. We also have put in the request yet again to expand the Snowmass regional service to Highway 82 to match the BRT commuter services in the spring, summer, and fall, making that a 15-minute headway for Snowmass residents, visitors, and commuters. So, and you'll get a little bit of an update on the Glenwood Springs Grand Avenue Bridge project from RAFTA on just how that's going for them. I think it's really important that, one is that at the RAFTA retreat, that I've been told that it will be brought up as one of the ITSP, the Integrated Transportation System Plan elements, this expansion of service to Snowmass, but funding and those sort of things are not included in the preliminary draft of the RAFTA 2018 budget. So I think if we're looking to make that service expansion, we need to raise that possibly at some point during the discussion with RAFTA, whether it's in that budget presentation or during the retreat itself when they touch on the planning elements for the ITSP plan.
Do you have any sense of why that wasn't incorporated into the budget that I looked at last night? It's not in the assumptions at all. for
It's
the
not
RAFTA
in the, I
budget.
think it's a status quo assumption going into it, and possibly it'll come out of the retreat discussion.
The issue is between RAFTA and the EOTC for this extra service. The extra service was identified at $294,000 to get the 15-minute headways. The discussion with RAFTA is, hey, as a county, we give you a significant amount of money. Can't you roll some of this additional service into your existing revenue and budget expenditures kind of thing? And hopefully they would come back and say, well, we can absorb some of this extra service in our budget. And then the request to the EOTC would be, okay, RAFTA's coming up with X, the EOTC will come up with the balance of Y, and therefore the Snowmass can still get service that's only half as much as everybody else on the BRT, but at least we're getting the 15-minute versus the 8-minute service. And so there's two different discussions. There's the morning discussion that Mark, you'll be at with the whole board of RAFTA.
So maybe doing that for me now.
I'm going.
Oh, I'm sorry, so Alyssa will be there
Brand new.
in the morning saying, hopefully RAFTA can step up a little bit and absorb some. And then the afternoon where most of y'all will be there for the OTC is, we've identified this cost at the $290,000. We've talked about it at least 2 different times at different EOTC meetings. We think it's a fair discussion to have to make sure that our service level is getting closer to on par with everybody else. And so far, you've heard, relative support for it, and now we've got the numbers to back it up. And on this meeting on Thursday is not the decision-making meeting. It's to continue that discussion going forward. The decisions would be made in the budget in next month's EOTC meeting, the October meeting. We think we're backed up for the equity argument. We think we're backed up on a lot of different things. And then both the community forum from the Aspen Institute has talked about increased connections through the BRT and a lot of other things. We think we can say this makes sense. This is within all the planning guidelines that the EOTC is seeing. Let's get that service level up on this part of the regional service. And we'll see what happens, but that's the pitch on Thursday.
And does the study show certain time frames for that 15-minute headway, or is it across the board?
Well, we're not, this request is very specific to the service hours of the BRT, Bus Rapid Transit Service.
Right.
There's no point to have a trip to the intercept lot if there's no transfer to a bus going up and down the valley. So the goal is to sort of not take away some of that pressure of, well, I've got to time my transfer, it's either on the hour or half past, and well, maybe I'll just drive my car then, because that's just too hard to work out. We're hoping that with 15-minute intervals, then using the BRT platform to make your commute or your trip into Aspen or whatever it may be, that makes it more automatic that you might use the bus rather than drive your car. Has implications for our parking issues up here.
Right.
I think another thing that's tied to this is that the FLAP grant that's talked about in the budget part and the 3.8 or 9 million that's programmed now in 2019 in Tom Oken's budget matrix, for that to have some value to Snowmass, it's got to work as a bit of a park and ride for us on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And this BRT service is kind of incremental for that to get to where our labor pool would be looking at that as a viable park and ride solution. And it's definitely in the Base Village PUD that their employees are going to park at this facility, and that's going to be how they're going to access Snowmass is through a transportation system out of the intercept lot. So
And what are the timeframes for BRT?
it's in Dan's memo on page,
Basically rush hours.
It's
It's
basically
6:15
right.
AM,
to
PM rush
9:15,
hours.
2:15 to 6:45.
right, that's
Right.
the spring, and then summer is a little more all day.
Yeah, it's 6:15 to 8:45 PM.
Yes.
But the goal is to have 15-minute headways, not a BRT system for Snowmass.
Correct. Because there are elements of a BRT system that don't exist. Dedicated lane and a right-of-way, those kind of things, they don't exist on Brush Creek Road, where they do exist on Highway 82. And to build a separate system for Snowmass would be
Doesn't make sense.
probably a little more than anybody would want to bite off financially.
Mm-hmm.
This seemed to be a reasonable approach.
So the summer is 7 days a week, including the weekends. I think
believe-
that's, it said,
Yeah,
but then the spring and the fall is just the weekdays.
correct.
Yep.
Because there is no regional BRT service on the trunk,
Yep.
on the highway corridor.
Okay. So, and none of that was budgeted for in the RAFTA budget?
Nope.
And that's the chicken and egg discussion you can expect to hear Thursday. Oh, well, we should wait to hear from the RAFTA board, and we should, well, which comes first? And David and I have said, no, the EOTC should be acting on this. They're our regional partners. We should be talking and embracing this concept, and then hopefully we can get RAFTA to play ball with us. And if not, then the EOTC should be helping to provide that equitable service that we're asking for. And that's the discussion we hope to have Thursday to roll into the budget that'll be presented in October.
Your challenge, as we all know, is the initial funding from RAFRA to RAFTA, and how the ball was played. And you have people on EOTC who have memories that unfortunately are not friendly to the request from Snowmass from way back when, and Dave, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Yep.
I would say
We need to
when-
forget those days.
the formation of the RTA ended all of that.
Yes.
And if they want to revisit the pre-RTA history, so be it. What is lacked in those discussions from certain
Yes.
representatives is that in those days, regardless of whatever Snowmass's budget was, by comparison, they wanted to split the Pitkin County bus at the time, a third. And they
Exactly.
kept going, Snowmass pony up, and you're going, well, wait a minute. We're not as big as, don't have those resources. Our sales tax that was in place was subsidizing our internal village shuttle system. And then we started bringing up, look, this is sales tax leakage, mostly going from Snowmass to Aspen. So you have to somehow take that into consideration, that this is, everybody's going into town to party at night, so you're the direct beneficiary, Aspen, of this request.
Right.
More so than us, other than we're symbiotic in our relationship. And so, those things never wanted to play, because obviously politically they don't feed the right argument, but depending on who you are. And it was 2-1. So that is why it was said, okay, well, if you're not gonna give us any, we all heard the stories and we all lived through some of it, some of us, that where you had cash fare boxes where you couldn't even put money in anymore, because all the Snowmass people were paying with cash going to town.
Right.
And weren't taking advantage of discounted fares. And we were going to at least give us some credit for that. Well, no, they couldn't do that. They can't figure that out. So you kind of said, well, okay, then that's where why did we say fares? Those reasons
Right.
led to, if you're not gonna give us any credits for these various aspects, then, okay, take it out of the fares.
And now we're saying, okay, those decisions have been made, those have been rectified, or, you know, at least made to where they are. Now we're saying our service on that BRT is half, more than half, less than half, than what, you know, Aspen gets or on 82 is. And so we're just saying, get us to that 15, and we think that's a great start for us.
I think it's very reasonable.
And that's what we think too, and that's, the numbers are there, the budget shows it's affordable. I mean, we could expect a discussion about, hey, you know, every dollar we spend in operations is a dollar we don't spend in capital. Very true, but we think that the operations are worthy. We think of getting that 15-minute service with all the, you know, the jobs up here, the people getting to and from, the tourists, everything.
You got Base
Makes it
Village
well.
coming up, we've gotta get this taken care of.
And so, and then and Thursday is this kind of policy discussion. We expect it to be plugged into the budget for October. And again, that's where we think, that's where the real decision gets made. But we've plugged it into our budget for 18, and we're hoping EOTC will plug it in that budget as well.
And the other piece that we hope that is in the 2014 travel pattern study that we conducted with Charlier and Associates and a RAFTA study of the region. 3 years now, it's been done in increments, but to verify that, 46% of the residents of Snowmass are working in Aspen, and that represents 10% of the commuter flow into Aspen. So again, it's not just a parochial self-serving our employees. There's this, that we are also the bed base for their labor force. So they are direct beneficiaries of this service enhancement as well.
And help solve the problem.
And help solve
It's
their own.
not just for us, it's for everybody.
Solve their own problem, their
Yeah.
mobility problem.
Exactly. So those are just some points to try and help you, you know, with that as you discuss it with your counterparts, that this is regional service. It's not Snowmass service.
And I think that's the takeaway. It's regional, on purpose, by design, and that's what we're asking for.
Okay.
Hope that
There's a
helps.
lot on this agenda
For
Oh,
Thursday?
Yeah.
Thursday, and I have to leave at 5:30. I have an event starting at 6 that you're all invited to at T Lazy 7.
I think that's the important thing. We've got the data to show that the 15-minute headways
Yes.
are needed. We're a part of the solution to the problem.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's a long agenda, because I know the Upper Valley Mobility Report, you know, it's got on here 45 minutes, it'll take a good hour, as you and I know.
Yeah, it depends how long-winded it gets, yeah,
It'll get a lot of discussion.
yeah.
I mean, for the budget question, of that 294 question, I think the big thing that David and I have been working through with their staff, and it could be reiterated on Thursday, is that as the budget is developed and to be proposed in October, we think this dollar should be just included, and we don't have to make another presentation in October. We think we've shown the numbers, that the direction will hopefully be, yes, included in the October consideration, and that way we don't have to, it'll make it a cleaner discussion in October, we believe.
And on page 4 of your EOTC packet, you'll see Tom Oken's budget, and it's there as the last purple line item in his budget presentation. So it's included in the 5-year look, 2018, 19, 20, 21. So, important in that is Snowmass's reserve fund for the transit project up here is still whole at the end of 2021. There is still a reserve balance for the EOTC of some 9.5 million in 2021.
Yep.
You know, so there's a lot of, you could still build the buttermilk underpass and still be even or in the positive, most likely. Even if you didn't get a grant to help you with it.
So if we decided to charge ahead with a transportation center at the mall, we would have the funds by 2022.
2021, you would have the full 6.2 million.
Right.
That we've kind of had earmarked for that for many years.
And another conversation we need to have at some point is that the cap on Snowmass.
I think that, yeah, that's another,
That's another sticking point that's been there for how many years?
for years, for
Yes.
decades.
What's that number?
That's a cap. Snowmass
cap.
can't have any more in their little box
Then that's 6 million?
than that 6 million. That goes back
And
to,
it was a bond vote somewhere around 2001,
Yeah.
and 7 million was identified as one of the approved uses should they enact the bonds, and that was a $7 million bonding for a project up here for improvements to the regional transit center. And that number has stuck since 2001.
even though
as
there's more
that's what
money
you're gonna
available.
get.
Yes,
And some people were more vocal about that's all you'll ever get.
yes.
And if you remember, it was last year, the discussion, everyone tried to stop using the term lockbox. That's that lockbox. And they were trying to change the terminology for the budget to add some flexibility. The county was a big advocate for that because they don't have a lockbox. And so they wanted to make sure there's some flexibility in how those dollars get spent as well. So I think that discussion, I think there's at least 2 organizations that are quite open to having that, whether it happens Thursday or October or whenever, but
Thursday.
I think there's some people lining up for that.
Is everybody gonna be at the meeting?
No.
You're leaving to go to,
I'm leaving Thursday.
okay.
Gonna be there, but I'm gonna leave early as well with you.
Do you have any other questions about?
We'll just hold down the fort, don't worry about us.
Yeah, we won't have quorum once the 2 of us leave.
Yeah,
We
that's
wrapped
right.
in
They're
that
gonna have to
meeting
get the
all
voting done
And,
before.
and there's not a lot of decisions. I mean, basically Thursday's a lot of updating. I don't, if you remember, it was kind of set up, the idea was to have this meeting set up the budget for October because with the entrance to Aspen study being done, the idea, how are we gonna make something happen? With the results that they've occurred, this meeting's morphed a little bit, so there's not a lot of voting that I would anticipate happening. This is more of a set up as a work session, and in October, you'll make that vote and that decision.
Yes.
Okay. Will be interesting.
Well, thank you, council.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
So David, you're not opposed if we call you up to make a few statements about
Yeah, I'm happy to.
294,000?
My name's on the communique, so I'll probably start.
We'll be there presenting.
Okay, okay, fine, good.
If we have time.
Okay. Well, if I bringing up the right thing. Okay, we're gonna move into the executive session here. It is a recommendation of Snowmass Village Town staff that the council make and approve the following motion. Town council will now meet in executive session pursuant to CRS 24640224 and Snowmass Village Municipal Section 245C to specifically discuss one item. Personnel matters, except if the employees who is subject to the session as requested in an open meeting pursuant to CRS 24640224FL and Snowmass Village Municipal Code Section 245C6. Provided there is an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the quorum present at this meeting to hold an executive session and for the sole purpose of considering item A above, provided further that no adoption of any proposed policy, position, resolution, regulation, or formal action shall occur at this executive session. Do I have a motion accordingly to go into executive session?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Do I have a
Second.
Thank you very much. All in support?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. And we will adjourn to the conference room in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Is the conference room, Travis?